Kingdom Hearts stands as one of my favorite franchises, right there with Sonic, Mega Man, Metal Gear, and what you might know with all of these is that at one point or another, they told their stories episodically. Each game worked off of the story of the last one. You needed the context of Sonic Adventure 2 to grasp some of Sonic Heroes' plot points. Mega Man X1 through 4 makes X5 more tragic, and the entirety of Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4 stands as what I'd consider the closest to perfection a multi-game story has gotten. These days, games focus further on a single product that's updated for a long time, such as Overwatch, Fortnite, and Fall Guys. Now, I'm not gonna be a fucking boomer and say that this method is wrong. I certainly rocked my cock off for every fighting game update like Ultimate MVC 3 or Persona 4 the Ultimax Ultra Suplex Hold, so I'm sure some people enjoy the gut-wrenching of seasonal updates, but it still irks me a tad because we all know that inevitably it just leads to Tekken 7 Dark Resuscitation or whatever the fuck it'll be. My point is that these episodic natured standalone releases have become less frequent in recent years. Long-running series don't expect you to have knowledge more than maybe one or two other games. It's why so many people think that some of these franchises, whether they're a game or not, have such a difficult bar of entry. The perfect example of that idea is Kingdom Hearts. However, KH isn't actually that hard to understand. You just have to commit to following it through. Because if gone through in the order of release, Kingdom Hearts teaches you a new language that reinterprets what you've already known. Now, to make it simple for you guys, I want to lay down what I'm getting into here. This is going to be a multi-part series I'm doing, and by the time this video series ends, you should grasp why Kingdom Hearts' methods of telling its story stands apart from other games. You should understand that any series with chronological jumps should be gone through in release order with only a few acceptable exceptions, and how KH integrates the themes of Final Fantasy, Disney, and itself to connect a really fucking big puzzle. Now, for anyone somehow not in the know, Kingdom Hearts is a hippie propaganda series that fuses together the characters, story elements, and ideals of Final Fantasy and Disney to create a completely new world. The first game came out on PS2 in 2002 and followed a young island boy named Sora that was chosen to wield the Keyblade after he separated from his two best friends, Kairi and Riku. He then embarks on a fantasy adventure with Donald Duck and Goofy, who are searching for the King, which they make pretty fucking obvious as Mickey Mouse. Now use the mystical Keyblade to lock the keyholes of worlds based on Disney films and two inspired by Final Fantasy to stop them from being destroyed by the Heartless and the Disney villains, all the while form a friendship that can't be broken even if they fight from time to time. Now, in a twist as far as Disney and most RPGs go, it has a somber fucking ending that results in none of our heroes reuniting with who they sought out for. And in a ballsy fucking move, it ends with a teaser for the next game. Yeah, sequel baiting happens often, like with Sigma showing up at the end of Mega Man X1 or Gruntilda talking about seeing us in Banjo 3. But this is a full-on CG cutscene that for 2002 would have cost way too much to just slip in without someone in finances noticing. If they put this in, they had some confidence this series was Stacy's mom, which is even more crazy when you think about the concept itself. Mixing Final Fantasy and Disney could only have really failed or succeeded in the most spectacular of fashions. And since it did succeed, it led to two sequels before Nomura remembered that time is an abstract concept and decided to go back between, forward a little bit, really far back on the GBA, Nintendo DS, PSP, 3DS, fucking Facebook. Yeah, Square Enix realized that the series was a little hard to follow and spent about half of the 2010s putting them into collections on PS3 and PS4, which eventually culminated in the Kingdom Hearts all-in-one package consisting of the entire Dark Seeker saga, which includes Kingdom Hearts 1, Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts 2, 358 Days Over 2, Birth by Sleep, Coded, Dream Drop Distance, Point 2 a Fragmentary Passage, and Kingdom Hearts 3. Now also in the collection, Coded and 358 Over 2 are only represented by cutscenes, which is probably a choice to make going through the series less tedious, while maintaining the integrity of its story. Now, something not in the Dark Seeker saga in this collection is the original film Kingdom Hearts Key back cover, which pretty much retells all of the important parts of the phone game Kingdom Hearts Key. Now that may sound like a lot of work to keep track of, but remember, it's all in one game case now. Not only that, but the menus for the collections guide you in what order to play them, with the exception of 358 Over 2 coming before KH2, which I'll argue the massive problems for later on. Starting the Kingdom Hearts series is easier than ever, as long as you start here, with the first game. Go fucking figure. Now, after giving it a lot of thought and a lot of workshopping, I've decided to make this into a series of smaller videos instead of my usual half-hour or more videos that I think this is actually going to end up as anyways. Well, fuck, look at that timestamp. So for this video, I'm only going to be looking at Kingdom Hearts 1 and mainly how it recontextualizes Final Fantasy and Disney to create a new story. And also, this part in particular will have more story summary than I planned for later parts, and that's because if I don't include it now, I'm going to be backtracking a lot in part 2 onwards. Now, part 2 2, we're going to be looking at Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2 with a heavy focus on how they reach a conclusion, develop beyond Sora, and work off of the first game's precedent as well as each other. The third part will look at how 358/2, Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance throw everything already known for triple full with a little bit of recoded thrown in there just for completion's sake. Since my main points are about how Kingdom Hearts teaches you about its world, I don't particularly plan to have a video about Cage 3 in this series. I'd consider that game more of a final test on what you've learned story-wise, so I don't think it fits into my points. However, I do pretty much all of these videos on the fly, and my thoughts may change after the third part, and it's also very possible I might split part 3 into 2 parts, which if that were to happen, it'll look kinda like this on screen. One of the ways Kingdom Hearts 1 makes itself accessible is by abusing that it's a crossover of two very well-known ideas. In fact, there's only 4 characters that are 100% original in it. Everyone else comes from Disney or Final Fantasy. Of course, the Final Fantasy and Mickey Mouse characters have altered backstories, but that doesn't change that we recognize them the moment we see them. Donald's a loud quack, Leon's super cool, Goofy's a goof, and Yuffie's best girl. Time doesn't need to go towards telling us who they are, since Disney is the most well-known brand on Earth, and circa 2002, Final Fantasy had debatably the most clean critical slate of any gaming franchise. Kingdom Hearts saw the efficiency in recontextualizing what they already had, which gave everyone who's seen a Disney movie or played a Final Fantasy game a bit of a head start. Especially given that 2/3 of your party are Donald Duck and Goofy, who you're gonna have to work pretty hard to not know of. While it's not gonna be a focus in this series, the reusing goes for gameplay as well, which follows a lot of FF staples like item and spell names, synthesis, Moogle, summons, FF9's ability system, etc. It's a simple reuse of ideas that's effective if you're an FF fan, and it helps that Final Fantasy uses pretty simple spell names in the first place. What the fuck is a Bufu? And to get the player more invested in the original parts of Kingdom Hearts, it spends the entirety of the prologue introducing us to 3 of the original characters. We have our main characters Sora, the Virgil of the game Riku, and the girl Kairi. Before then, Sora has a weird tutorial dream at the beginning with a small introduction to some black creatures we fight, but after that we really just see the 3 of them run and banter on the island like regular old friends. Selphie, Wakka, and Tidus from Final Fantasy are also here, and while their designs are changed pretty drastically, they exist more so to flesh out the island's population with characters that don't require a full introduction, giving us more time to focus on our main 3 characters. And pretty quickly, we understand the dynamic of these 3's friendship. Sora and Riku are rivals at everything, Sora and Kairi have a schoolyard crush on each other, and Riku wants to prove he can protect Kairi better than Sora, but it's not really a love triangle unless you mean kinda like this. The prologue is mostly just happy fun times between the 3, besides when this creepo shows up for 2 minutes to say absolutely nothing of importance to Sora that we just don't need to worry about. Let's go back to happy fun times. Eventually it ends with a nasty storm of darkness overtaking the island, with these black creatures from the tutorial showing back up, but this time Sora can't fight them. This wooden sword means jack fucking shit. And while this is happening, we're gonna find Riku, who's then dragged into the darkness, and he almost takes Sora with him until he's saved by this light, which is this giant fucking pipe that kinda looks like a key, thus allowing him to defeat the dark creatures. Then he finds Kairi, and she goes right through him, followed by a boss fight, and then Sora wakes up in a new place called Traverse Town, which is where stragglers go after their world is destroyed, or someone who had too much to drink last night. Now let's scroll back a bit. As I mentioned, 2/3 of our main party is Donald Duck and Goofy. So interspersed during the intro, we see a few scenes of Donald, Goofy, and a few other Disney Shorts characters learning that the king has gone missing, meaning that Donald and Goofy need to find the person with what's called the key, stay with him until they meet up with the king, and also find someone named Leon in Traverse Town to guide the start of their journey. It's kind of neat that the first mention of him here is as Leon with no picture, because we're gonna learn as Sora that Leon is actually Squall from FF8, just going by a less bitchy name. So now Leon as well as Yuffie explain a lot of the goings on in the universe, such as Heartless, the Keyblade, and other worlds to Sora, while Aerith does the same for Donald and Goofy in the next room over. That whole exposition keeps going on until some Heartless find them, and then they all have to run away, then they meet up with each other, and then our 3 heroes realize that their goals align and they stay together forever. And now with all 3 of them standing next to each other, I want to point out how fucking well Sora's designed. This is just such a clean mix of Mickey Mouse and typical Nomura FF designs. We got spiky hair, whacked proportions, Mickey's red pants, white gloves, yellow shoes, and then we also got this healthy amount of zippers, chains, and belts, but not too many, and I just think it really meshes well with Donald and Goofy's FF-inspired redesigns, which drives home that Sora is the stand-in for Mickey in this trio, but he's also an original character. And while I'm on the topic of character designs, Riku is just the perfect parallel to Sora. Slightly taller, white hair that flows downward, no sleeves, his primary colors are Sora's secondary colors, Sora's got fingerless gloves, so Riku's gloves are just all finger, and a fucking X over his chest to symbolize how his heart's closed to contrast Sora's open jacket to show how open his heart is. Holy shit, is this design great. Now with a lot of characters, gameplay terms, and locales coming from something else, we can look into what Kingdom Hearts 1 creates itself, which is a lot of terminology and new concepts, most of which were going to be introduced to us in Traverse Town by Leon, Yuffie, and Aerith. And I want to stress that they only introduce these concepts. Kingdom Hearts has an air of mystery that permeates throughout the game. Sora has no fucking clue what is going on, while Donald and Goofy know very little more. And I think the tutorial dream, Traverse Town, and even the box art prepares you for that air of mystery. You are going into this game with a lot of questions, and you are coming out with way more.
What the hell was that?
Luckily, the series strays away from using too many made-up words and tries to slow itself on Latin terminology, besides in song names where it goes fucking all out with its Guardando nel buio and Limpeto oscuro. All of our important key concepts are recontextualized English words, or words of the translation you're playing. Now, I'm about to lay a lot down here, but keep in mind that while Kingdom Hearts 1 throws a lot at us at once, only a few new terms are taught to us per game as the series progresses. By the way, throwing this in later, during that big exposition scene, Aerith is also going to tell us about KH1's fourth original character, Ansem, who she says used to rule over the world which the Final Fantasy characters originally came from. He'll be more relevant later, so we'll leave that as is for now. For KH1, the most important concepts we learn are Keyblade, Darkness, Light, Hearts, Worlds, and Heartless. There's a few other important ideas that are brought up, but these are the ones I'd say have the most importance for KH1, and all stick for the entire series, where it will be played with extensively. The closest thing to a completely brand new concept in KH1 is the Keyblade, which itself isn't real, but I'm sure just about any of you can figure out that it's a mix between a key and a blade, and the weapon used by Sora. As far as KH1 goes, this is the Keyblade that chose Sora as its wielder, and he's the only person currently in the Realm of Light that can use it. If anyone not chosen, such as Leon or Riku, take hold of the Keyblade, Sora can just take it back. Because of that, we get the implication that the Keyblade could have a heart of its own without any confirmation or deconfirmation of said idea. KH1 does everything in its power to emphasize the mysticism of the Keyblade, while also being the only game to actually properly introduce it. However, no one Sora talks to has ever seen a Keyblade, or at the very least, no one ever makes it explicit they'd ever seen one before. Even Leon and Yuffie, when explaining what a Keyblade is to Sora, had never seen one until this point. So all we, the player, know is that it's a big fucking key that unlocks every door and chest it's used on. It selected Sora as the chosen key bearer, the Heartless can track Sora because he has the Keyblade, and we need it to lock the keyholes in every world to stop the Heartless and Darkness from going into it to destroy a world. Let's get into Darkness. At its core, KH1 is a very simple light versus darkness story. Sora, Donald, Goofy, and any heroes we meet are light, while Maleficent, Jafar, and any other villains we meet are darkness. It's a very simple Heroes of Light story at the moment, and the only small twist in that narrative is the implications that light needs darkness to exist, which is an idea Final Fantasy has played with since FF3. Now, there's two realms, the Realm of Light and the Realm of Darkness. Most worlds we go to exist in the Realm of Light, which mostly includes the Disney world, Sora's home, Destiny Island, and the world that the Final Fantasy gang come from. Each world on the Realm of Light exists almost completely separate from each other, with few characters aware of worlds outside of their own. Mainly the Disney villains know, and we're gonna talk about that way later on how they know that, but basically it's all because of Maleficent. Conversely, the Realm of Darkness is a completely connected realm, but the only inhabitants are the main mooks of the series, the Heartless. There's two types of Heartless in the series, Purebloods and Emblem Heartless. A Pureblood Heartless comes to fruition from a heart that's become overwhelmed with darkness, losing all sense of conscience and emotion, while an Emblem Heartless are artificially created and only exist when they steal one or more hearts from someone else. So despite being called a Heartless, they do somewhat have one or more hearts at all times, and depending on their amount of hearts, that also has something to do with their hierarchy that's never fully explained. Now, given that this is a fantasy story, the heart isn't the real scientific vessels and cardiac arrests, but the more poetic hopes, fears, and friendships. Whenever the heroes kill a Pureblood Heartless, they send them back to the Realm of Darkness where they came from, while killing an Emblem Heartless returns the extra hearts to their rightful bodies. Now, in the canon of the story, the name Heartless comes from a misunderstanding that Ansem had about the creatures when he initially thought that they had no hearts at all. He later realized a slight error, but the name stayed after that and for the remainder of the series. Personally, I also look at the name a little differently. Instead of a heartless being, someone without a heart, they're a weaker heart, a heart of lesser strength. Like a less heart, but that doesn't sound as well as heartless. Now, hearts are something that everyone has, whether they're a person or a Heartless. The only question is whether that heart belongs to light or darkness. During KH1, Sora and Riku show the opposite sides of the spectrum. Their story has them both separated from each other and leaving their island like they dreamed during the intro of the game. Riku ends up alone on this mysterious world which is overrun by Maleficent in the darkness, who takes advantage of his weakness, while Sora ends up at Traverse Town where he meets Donald, Goofy, and the Final Fantasy gang, who all guide him on how his journey should go. Even before this point, Riku's more overwhelmed with what's seen as negative emotions like jealousy and pride when compared to Sora, who's a lazy bum.
You're stupid!
Each world plays into a different theme of Hearts. I know most people talking about Kingdom Hearts will say that the Disney portions are just Donald, Goofy, and some anime boy going through the story of a Disney film, but that's actually a grave simplification. While it is true that much of the real plot stuff happens in the original worlds, KH1 gives a good amount of its lore and world building in the Disney worlds. Of the 9 Disney worlds in KH1, only Agrabah actually follows parts of Aladdin, while Monstro and Wonderland take heavy inspiration from a single scene of their respective films. Most of the stories in each are original, or at the least repurposed to have something to do with hearts. For example, Wonderland toys with the idea of a person who becomes protective of their heart because of their darkness. Tarzan and Agrabah show men that are willing to give in to the darkness for their desires. Monstro and Halloween Town explore what constitutes a genuine heart, and Neverland doesn't count for this list because it's mainly to kick off the game's final act by re-injecting Kairi into the story. Pretty much all of them also have an underlying message of friendship pulling you through to the end, like the relationship between Aladdin and Genie, Pinocchio and Jiminy, Jack and Sally, or Sora, Donald, and Goofy's relationship at the Tarzan world. I know so many people who like to say that the Disney parts in KH games are unimportant, but most of the entries actually try their best to flesh out the message of each individual game, and in KH1's case, open us up to the idea of what this universe's heart feels like. Now, hearts are going to be played with a lot as we go on, so let's put those away for a second, while we get into the worlds, because that's another concept that's only properly introduced in KH1. As mentioned before, Kingdom Hearts is the realm of light and the realm of darkness. What's interesting about worlds in the realm of light, and the realm in between, which you can probably figure out what that's about, is that you get to them in a spaceship to find something with a planet-like shape. Although despite that shape, each world has its own set of rules and guidelines closer to an alternate dimension instead of a planet. Each world also can't know about each other because that would break the world order. It's a fairly important idea that becomes a throwaway or even a gag line in every subsequent game. Now, the whole world order idea allows for the drastically different Disney worlds the gang goes to. Because of the almost meaningless battle levels, KH1 wants you to go to Wonderland first, which is probably to make Sora, Donald, and Goofy see that a world's order can be fucking opium. Going from Traverse Town to Wonderland is going to be a drastic change. An important aspect of these worlds is that each of them have their own hearts. Just like a person's heart, they can succumb to the darkness as well, which is why the Heartless's goal in every world is to bring them to the realm of darkness. However, it's not done in a well thought out manner, but purely by instinct. And because of that, Disney villains can abuse the lack of awareness of the Heartless to help serve their own goals in each world as well. Mainly kidnapping the Princesses of Heart and just flat out fucking with Sora. To take a world to the realm of darkness, Heartless need to find a world's keyhole, which acts as a bridge to the world's heart. Locking the keyhole is one of the primary jobs that only the keybearer can accomplish. Locking a world's keyhole doesn't necessarily end Heartless from wreaking havoc on the world, but does prevent them from taking the world itself into the realm of darkness. What used to keep Heartless off of worlds of light and other worlds of light from being connected are invisible barriers in space. But because of the increase of rampaging Heartless during the events of KH1, the barriers that normally keep these worlds separate have gone weak, meaning that anyone with a ship can get to any world they want. Luckily, no one in the Disney worlds actually know of the Keyblade or about other worlds except for the Disney villains who have weekly tea sessions, and King Triton in Atlantica who tells Sora that he needs to stop meddling in the affairs of other worlds because the Keybearer only brings ruin wherever he goes. And that's a scene that foreshadows so fucking much of future titles despite coming from a Disney character, which typically that's not how it goes. Anyways, with the whole barrier business, restoring them becomes one of the gang's primary goals, which can only happen by beating the Squaresoft video game Kingdom Hearts 1 for PlayStation 2. Interestingly, a lot of the worlds in KH1 end in cliffhangers of varying sizes. Monstro ends with us not knowing where Pinocchio and Geppetto went. Oh wait, there he is, never mind, let's move on. And then Agrabah and Wonderland, which are about saving Alice and Jasmine, ends with the two of them getting captured, which we will get back to later. And then Olympus also ends on a cliffhanger that's not looked at again until KH2. And actually, I didn't mention it at all. So Olympus is mostly about Sora, Donald, and Goofy proving themselves as real heroes. It involves beating enemy gauntlets planets, and it's mostly optional. What makes it one of the most loved worlds in the game is that Cloud comes in with this raw as fuck design that engages every fiber of my edgy brain. And keep in mind that this is before the compilation of FF7, so Cloud being here is fucking wild. I mean, look at this guy. You might notice this design does not have his usual deal. He's got Vincent's gauntlet, the scarf, and this demonic wing, which is either a reference to Vincent's transformation into chaos, or as a parallel to Sephiroth's blue angel wing, which actually first appeared here before moving into later compilation of FF7 games. Anyways, his story here is that Cloud has struck a deal with Hades, where if he kills Hercules in the usually non-lethal Colosseum, Hades will reconnect Cloud with who he's looking for. And to do this, Cloud took up the use of darkness and only stopped himself from falling too far because of Sora and Hercules' assistance. Now the rest of this is all optional, but there is a secret boss of Sephiroth who, after defeating, we get clarification that he's who Cloud was looking for with Hades. Now there, Cloud calls Sephiroth his own darkness, while Sephiroth admits to being untainted by light. It's an entire plotline that only makes full sense with the context of Cloud and Sephiroth's relationship from Final Fantasy VII. After their little talk, they fight each other, but we never see who wins since, as every piece of FF7 content has emphasized, the two of them will always be each other's nightmare. It's a pretty fancy allusion to the Genova Cells and Genova reunion that you really gotta just play FF7 for, or maybe watch my video about Remake. Back to Jasmine and Alice, they're actually 2 of the 7 princesses of heart that Maleficent and her gang are looking for. These 7 girls possess hearts completely devoid of darkness and are the key to opening what Jafar refers to at the mid-game as the door. The 7 of them were taken by Maleficent to the world known as Hollow Bastion, which Leon, Cloud, and the rest of the Final Fantasy characters came from and Riku's journey started at. As I said earlier, Riku and Sora have been going down completely different paths during the story, but their one shared goal is to reunite themselves with each other and Kairi. Their differences converge first after finishing the initial set of Disney worlds when Riku learns of Sora's new role as the key bearer and how he's been chilling with Donald and Goofy this whole time, which Maleficent uses to swag the Jelly Nelly into thinking that Sora's abandoned him to have a Keyblade and brand new friends. They meet up 2 more times at Monstro and Neverland, which for all intents and purposes are Sora and Riku worlds with a Disney paint job on them. At Monstro, Riku fucks with Sora because he misses him and wants to learn why Pinocchio has a heart. As you might recall from the movie, Pinocchio is a regular puppet, which should be an empty body, you know, nobody. But he has a heart within him, and Riku says he needs to find out how he gained one so he can help Kairi. Jump to Neverland, and here's Riku again, who has Kairi's body and is just showing it off purely to fuck with Sora. Riku kinda scurries off, and then Captain Hook tells us after we beat the shit out of him that Riku and Maleficent fled to Hollow Bastion, which not even he dares go to. Now, Hollow Bastion is a world that's more inspired by Final Fantasy than Disney. It is pretty original, don't get me wrong, but boy is this not Disney. It's somewhat of an inverse of Traverse Town, since that world has a closer look to a low-tech town like Narshe or Calm, while Hollow Bastion resembles one of the more technologically advanced locations like Esther City or Bevella. However, HB has become infested with an unsurmountable degree of darkness and heartless, so it's a bit of a fucking wreck. And in that wreck, we find Riku fighting Beast, who's come to Hollow Bastion to save Belle by sheer fucking willpower. Like, by the rules of KH1 and every subsequent game, Beast should not be here. He's just too fucking angry to follow physics. Anyways, when Sora meets up with Riku, he makes a really big reveal that the Keyblade didn't actually choose Sora, but instead only picked him as the delivery boy to bring it to Riku. You see, once Riku fell into darkness on Destiny Islands, it just went to Sora next, cause he's the guy that was there. I guess it has some kind of location rule to it. But anyways, in Riku's infinite wisdom, he tells us how
there can't be 2 Keyblade masters.
So Sora's is taken by Riku, leaving him defenseless. And it's only made worse because our boys Donald and Goofy's orders were to follow the key, so they have to begrudgingly leave Sora. Fast forward a little through the short puzzle section of the Sora and Beast, and now we have Sora caught up to Riku, where we see that Riku has begun to control some of the darkness and in his rage attempts to hurt his defenseless best friend. Holy shit, what the hell, Riku? The only thing that saved Sora was his heart's power. Nah, just kidding, it was Goofy. Thanks to Goofy and a little bit Donald, I guess. Sora realizes that his power doesn't come from a Keyblade, but his heart that gives him power because all of the friends and experiences he's allowed inside of it. As long as he and his friends keep their memories of each other, he'll stay strong, leading to the now famous line, and say it with me, you bunch of lamers. My friends with my power. Which seems pretty cheesy now. Okay, it was pretty cheesy then, but this idea of connections with others reshaping ourselves is the most important through line of each Kingdom Hearts game. We just have it told to us in a very cheesy Disney way. But also ignoring the heart again, this big statement leads the Keyblade to warp back into Sora's hand, so hee hee hoo hoo, let's bash on Riku.
Darkness,
who after the fight runs off and then he talks to that shadowy figure we saw in the tutorial fucking forever ago, who convinces him to give in completely to darkness. And later on, after our first fight with Maleficent, the now double-voiced Riku appears with, despite what he said impossible,
there can't be two Keyblade Masters,
a second Keyblade. Whoa, holy shit. However, this one's not a traditional Keyblade. This was created by the hearts of the 6 princesses of heart they already have, and it has the capability of unlocking a person's heart, unleashing all of one's darkness instantly, which he used to turn Maleficent into a really hard dragon form, and boy did I not set myself up right for this run. Now, the Keyblade itself, I actually really hate the design in most aspects, but I do really like the teeth on it because it has this unfinished heart shape, which is to represent that there's still one more Princess of Heart missing from it. Because whoa, who could be our 7th? And oh boy, it turns out it's Kairi. The reason she's asleep is because her heart's been inside of Sora the whole time.
Kairi's inside me?
Hey yo, what the fuck?
And since Riku shouldn't be that smart and also has that weird, creepy, spooky voice,
don't you see yet? The princess's heart is responding.
He puts together that this isn't Riku, and we learn that Riku's body has been taken over by Ansem,
the Seeker of Darkness.
If you recall from way earlier, Aerith claimed him as a great ruler and researcher of Hollow Bastion. Yeah, turns out he's actually like totally really evil. So Ansem was mentioned near the beginning of the game and goes almost unmentioned during the middle, except for a few secret reports he has lying around that explain his research. And it also turns out he was this ghastly feature we briefly saw at the start and has been living rent-free in Riku's head like the way A2 lives in mine. Anyways, Ansem had actually been secretly leading Maleficent onto the plan to find the Princess of Heart, since the 7 of them are required to create the final keel on Hollow Bastion to act as a door to darkness. Once Sora and Riku Ansem fight, which is actually probably the toughest mandatory battle in KH1, Sora realizes he can't lock the keyhole because it's not technically finished, because all the Princesses of Heart are needed to create it. So he stabs himself with Ansem's Keyblade to free Kairi's heart and also destroy said Keyblade to return the other princesses' hearts. Of course this made Sora fucking die, so Kairi, Donald, and Goofy run away from a reformed Ansem Seeker of Darkness while the keyhole still radiates darkness while it's unlocked.
What's happening to me? Falling into darkness.
Anyways, now that our main character's dead, we move into playing as a completely irrelevant Heartless we have never seen before and start traversing to the bottom of Hollow Bastion. Getting down there doesn't take too long, and we eventually catch up to Donald, Goofy, and Kairi, who realizes that it's actually Sora's Heartless. Kairi hugs him, which turns him back to normal, rendering that whole 4-ish minute section completely fucking pointless. Since the 4 of them are back together, they run back to Traverse Town to reconvene and get Kairi's keychain, the Oathkeeper, before coming back to Hollow Bastion again to seal the keyhole and get Riku's keychain, the Oblivion. Sealing that keyhole allows the Final Fantasy characters to finally return to Hollow Bastion for the first time in 9 years. They tell us that if we defeat Ansem, we'll return the barriers between worlds and restore all of the worlds devoured by the Heartless, including Sora's Island. But there's a bit of a caveat that also requires disconnecting the worlds again, so they do give a pretty sad goodbye here. However, Aerith gives us a fun little world building thing no one I ever talk to brings up. So I briefly mentioned that you find some of Ansem's reports throughout the game, and at this point you could potentially have 5 of them, all of which tell a positive story of Ansem that reinforces that he's a good man. But if we go to the library, Aerith gives us 4 new reports that show just how fucked up his research was the whole time, including human tests and some freaky deaky shit going down in his basement. So forgetting those little reports, the ol' SDG heads to the end world of KH1, End of the World, which is made up of the parts of broken worlds. Since worlds have hearts, this is meant to be the combined heartless of every world swallowed by darkness. And since all of those worlds are going to go back after we defeat Ansem, this world's going to turn to nothing. End of the World is a changing mess of pieces that don't belong and has this weird unnatural organism look. This whole world is a giant heartless with little structure in its biology. I actually forget about this world when I'm going down the list in casual discussion, because oftentimes I'll think of it as closer to an action than a location. I think it's the perfect embodiment of the mysterious atmosphere around KH1, especially because there's not a lot of cutscenes here besides at the start and the end. It's almost all combat with a bunch of gauntlets of mooks, a boss against the devil from Fantasia, and then there's also this appearance of this brand new room, which looks totally important, that we can now officially say did fucking nothing throughout the Dark Seeker saga. No phone games in this household!
Yeet.
Hi, Roman here. Initially, I had a joke written in where I was going to throw my phone out the window, you know, because fuck phone games. However, I can't find any of my old phones, and my current one is fucking 5G. So forgive me for cutting out this joke, but personally, I think this dumb bit's funnier. To bookend KH1, the gang finds themselves in the broken, darkness-ruined version of Destiny Islands. There we find Ansem, who tells us that Destiny Islands is a prison, telling us,
"To the heart-seeking freedom, this island is a prison, surrounded by water." And so this boy sought out to escape from his prison, and he opened his heart to darkness.
Riku!
Don't bother. Your voice can no longer reach him where he is. His heart belongs again to darkness. In the end, every heart returns to the darkness whence it came. You see, darkness is the heart's true essence.
That's not true!
"Damn, Sora, you sure do know a lot about them hearts, don't you, buddy? It's almost like you had a whole fucking adventure about it." Sora claims that no matter how dark it gets, there's always going to be a small bit of light, thus beginning the final battle between the strongest being of darkness and three boys taking turns holding their brain cell. It's one of my favorite final boss gauntlets in any game, but we gotta skip on past this first part because I'm losing topic pretty wildly here. And now before his final phase, we fight next to the true door to darkness, which once opened will reveal the heart of all worlds, Kingdom Hearts, which holds not even the slightest glimmer of light, according to Ansem. So then really cool final phase, totally badass boss design, and after the battle, Ansem tells us that no matter what we do, the Keyblade alone cannot seal the door to darkness, prompting Ansem to reach to the door and nicely requesting that Kingdom Hearts fill him with the power of darkness. But then Sora go,
Kingdom Hearts is light!
and the light of Kingdom Hearts vanquishes Ansem, Seeker of Darkness. However, the boys still need to close the door to darkness, because when they look in, we have our first glimpse of the realm of darkness in the series, which sadly can't be closed from only one side. Thankfully, since Riku had lost his heart to darkness, he's on the other side to help. However, the realm of darkness has a lot of fucking heartless in there, which makes all seem hopeless. Until...
Your Majesty!
Holy shit, it's Mickey Mouse!
Now, Sora, let's close this door for good!
Yet at the very last moment, our man who didn't show up in any part of the game, Mickey Mouse, shows up with his own Keyblade, minimizing the threat of the Heartless and helping to seal the door to darkness. Sealing it leaves Sora, Donald, and Goofy outside in the realm in between, while Mickey and Riku are locked into the realm of darkness. Since the door is closed and Ansem's defeated, that means that the world pieces making up where the boys are start to break off to go back where they belong, magically putting Kairi here to give a quick goodbye to Sora, since she's supposed to go back to Destiny Island. And even though Sora also belongs there, him having the Keyblade and closing the door leaves them stuck with one road to walk with the boys, leaving the game on a really fucking big cliffhanger, especially when Pluto shows up with a letter with the King's seal and the secret CG ending that we'll talk about in part 2. When it comes to updating our concepts from the ending, I think the most important thing from this ending is A, no matter how dark things get, some light can still exist, because despite Kingdom Hearts lying in the realm of darkness, it still prevailed as light for at least long enough to defeat Ansem, which lets us believe that Mickey and Riku have a chance to survive in the realm of darkness. And B, Mickey has kicked Riku in the dick and shown us that two Keyblade Masters can exist, which leads us to wonder who can and can't wield a Keyblade, especially with the aforementioned secret ending having a boy wielding two Keyblades. So that was a lot. I know the last third was a majority story summary, but as I said, it's really important that the final act of KH1 is understood for what happens in Part 2. Kingdom Hearts 1 recontextualized Disney and Final Fantasy elements to create a fleshed out, disconnected world that somehow works well. It leaves nearly everything unanswered, but still tells a story that holds itself up powerfully by itself. While later games are still heavily rooted in Disney and Final Fantasy, we're about to start seeing it develop its own identity. In Part 2, I'm going to be looking at Chain of Memories in Kingdom Hearts 2 to see how exactly it did as such, and reach a reasonable conclusion to KH1's story.